Craig, welcome to the show. I'm lovely to hear you on. Thank you for working around my schedule this week and around various electricity power cuts.
Yeah, pleasure to try and help you, Michael. Hello to you and your listeners.
Yeah, good on you, mate. Hey, listen, I know what you wanted to talk about. It was that you went to the Local Government New Zealand conference last week, and you explained to them as chair of, now what are you chair of?
The Local Government Funding Agency.
That's right, the Local Government Funding Agency. How they can fund their way out of their problem. Is that right?
Well, no, I was on a panel and it was just to reiterate what had happened the previous week where the ministers, Bailey and Brown, I was with both of them at a press conference announcing that the LGFA, the Local Government Funding Agency, would be prepared to finance water companies set up by councils and also to finance, subject to shareholder support, finance growth councils. Now, that's a pretty simple formula, which is that if a council owns a water company in its own right or severally with other councils, i.e. a multiply owned council company, and local government speak, it's a council-controlled organisation, the CCO, but it's a company, then we would finance those water companies up to a maximum of 500% of their revenues, which of course are water charges. And we would also continue to fund the parent councils. This is something that we've been working on for quite some time at LGFA. We put the proposal to the incoming government soon after their election last year, and they agreed to run hard at it, and it was with great pleasure that we announced that. So what that means is what was perceived to be a financing constraint, a borrowing constraint by councils and their council-owned water companies is now no longer a constraint. And I wanted to make sure that members of, or those attending the conference last week understood that, and now it moves to questions of notifying the Crown of the state of their water assets, which the government's asking them to do for the next 12 months, and then are they going to set up their own water companies or in conjunction with others, or are they going to keep their water assets in the councils and not take them out of the company, out of the council. So the issues move to negotiating with other councils, how to share water assets, how they're going to work together. It goes to issues of asset quality and maintenance of those assets, and it goes to questions of if they are going to set up separate companies, what are the water charges going to be, and the need to consult with communities on all those choices. So I'm really pleased that we could find a solution to do that with the Crown. I just want to make some really important comments on the cost of all this. Minister Brown mentioned at the same meeting, the Local Government New Zealand conference, that the spend on Three Waters, in his words, was over $1.2 billion. That's been ripped up with the cessation of Three Waters in Parliament. It's been revoked. I then looked back at the budget documents in May to check the Department of Internal Affairs spend on new initiatives and cessation of old initiatives. In that budget, under the initiatives report, it clearly states that approximately $270 million will be saved by not progressing Three Waters going forward. So we have done this together with the Crown on the smell of an oily rag, with some clever thinking, cooperation, and delivered an outcome of choice. And I just think to myself, what a waste of time and effort over the last 4 years. What a waste.
When you say 1.2 billion, what was that factored into? Was that things like the wellness fund that they got given for councils to spend on anything but infrastructure? The cost of setting up new bureaucracies and organisation? Is that where that money budget went?
Yeah, rent for premises that are never used, salaries for executives that were never gainfully employed, money gifted to councils as a transition mechanism, consultancy work. You pretty much named them all, Michael.
God. God, we could have spent that money on health or education or anything,
You,
roads.
you think of all the alternative uses for that money. In the original proposals, where they scoped different ideas for the water reforms, this idea of water companies, CCOs, was in there as one of the options, but it was not chosen. So I despair at some of our policy making. So, you know, when I look at the councils around New Zealand, those that have got the initiative will grab this and figure out a way to make this work for their communities, which is terrific. And we now turn to, you know, affordability issues. I mean, some councils like Wellington have got enormous challenges with their infrastructure, and they face, you know, pretty high rates increases before they even start finishing or completing their repairs in their water networks. So every council will be slightly different. You know, will Wellington City set up a council-controlled organisation with Lower Hutt and Porirua, or how will the Hawke's Bay guys go, or Tauranga, Waikato, or Canterbury? These discussions are going to happen now, and some councillors are quite clearly not yet able to ask the right questions of their executives. So, you know, that community discussion will happen, which is fantastic. I'm a big believer in localism, the idea that, you know, problems are best solved closest to where the problem is, and partly that's what LGFA tries to do, tries to find financing for local solutions, you know, benefiting local communities. But we need these councils to take the opportunity and make the difference. You know, it's now moved on from financing constraints to engagement constraints, cooperation constraints, thinking about whether, you know, how much they need to change their networks, and then bringing innovation. You know, if you use the Internet of Things, water metering, how can you deliver much better conservation efforts for your water? Because we're not really going to be charging for water, we're really going to be charging for pipes and infrastructure.
Can I just ask, can I pose something with you here? This is, well, a partial solution that you've suggested to councils at local government meeting. Two of my local mayors, you've probably heard of their names. One is Brian Cadigan, who is the chair of the Clutha District Council, and the other is Gore District Mayor Ben Bell, who's been in the news for different reasons. They've said that they're not happy about the solution or the particular concept that you're talking about. In fact, Cadigan goes on to say it's as much use as giving a drowning person a glass of water. The government is providing no additional support, signing councils to still find solution with the tools available to them, namely rates and debt increases, so nothing has changed here. And the ability to have a longer term, such as 50 years to pay off a loan, reduce the annual cost, quote unquote, minusculely, but increases the duration of the pain significantly. And that was the nature of his comments. Bell, not quite as incendiary, but said that it was not going to work when they've got a small ratepayer base of only 6,000 people or 6,000 households. What's your reaction to those, and what's particularly to those mayors and to those councils?
Yes, so our solution, LGFA's solution, or contribution to the solution, is based on the fact that we are the lowest cost provider of debt to the sector. We were unable to lend to any of the solutions proposed under Three Waters. Three Waters companies proposed face private sector bank debt costs of borrowing. And what was not properly disclosed in all the debate was the ongoing interest costs of servicing bank debt for those water companies, because we could not finance them. Under this solution, we're a much cheaper financier of water CCOs than private sector banks. So I understand that some issues that they are raising, but relative to Three Waters, this is much cheaper and a much simpler, less complicated solution. But they're right, they move on to other issues, which is funding, which is rates, which is who do we join with? Do we become an orphan amongst the groups of people that don't want to deal with us, other councils? So they're right to think about that, but they've got to find their own way with their own communities and decide how they want to tackle this. They will be required to report to the to the ministers, to Wellington, on the state of their water assets and what they intend to do with it. So they're on a trajectory to make a decision. They can't sit back and do nothing.